Okay, what you'll find in this book. Beginning Ubuntu Linux 4th edition is divided into 7 parts, each of which contains chapters about a certain aspect of Ubuntu use. These parts can be read in sequence, or you can dip in and out of them at will. Whenever a technical term is mentioned, a reference is made to the chapter where that term is applied or explained. Part 1 examines the history and philosophy behind Linux operating system. We aim to answer many of the common questions about Linux. Such knowledge is considered to be as important, if not more so, than understanding the technical details on how Linux works. But although these chapters should be read sooner rather than later, they don't contain any technical information that you absolutely require to get started with Ubuntu. Part 2 covers installing Ubuntu on your computer. An illustrated guide is provided, and all installation choices are explained in depth. Additionally, you'll find a problem-solving chapter to help, just in case anything goes wrong. Part 3 focuses on getting started with Ubuntu. It covers setting up the Linux system so that it's ready to use. One chapter is dedicated to setting up common hardware devices such as printers, and another explains how you can secure your system. Other chapters in this part explore the desktop, explaining what you need to know to begin using Ubuntu on a daily basis. In Part 4, we take a look at how the underlying technology behind Linux functions. You're introduced to the command line prompt, and you learn how the file system works. It's in these chapters that you'll really master controlling Linux. Part 5 covers multimedia functions available for Ubuntu users, which let you watch movies and play back music. We also take a look at the image editing software built into Ubuntu. Part 6 moves on to explain how typical office tasks can be accomplished under Ubuntu. We investigate OpenOffice.org, the complete Office suite built into Ubuntu. After an introduction to OpenOffice.org, separate chapters explore its word processor, spreadsheet, database, and presentation package. You also learn how to use the Evolution email and personal information manager program. Part 7 carries on from Part 4 and takes an even more in-depth look at the underlying technology behind Ubuntu. This time, the emphasis is on giving you the skills you need to keep your system running smoothly. You learn how to install software, manage users, optimize your system, back up essential data, schedule tasks, and access computers remotely. Finally, Part 8 contains 4 appendices. The first is a glossary of Linux terms used not only in this book but also in the Linux and Unix worlds. The second appendix is a quick reference to commands typically used at the command line prompt under Linux. The third appendix explains how to get further help when using Ubuntu, and the fourth explains how to use the DVD-ROM and differences between various versions of Ubuntu. What's new in the 4th edition? The original edition of Beginning Ubuntu Linux was the first English language book to provide a guide to using Ubuntu, and it remains one of the best. Successive editions of the book have tracked the changes within the Ubuntu project and have improved each time. This edition of Ubuntu Linux, Beginning Ubuntu Linux, has been thoroughly updated and revised to take into account improvements introduced in the version 9.04 of the software, codenamed John T. Jackalope. The previous edition covered the 8.04 release. This version of Ubuntu has refined its multimedia support considerably, so much so that support for many file types you'll encounter on the internet and elsewhere are supported through an automated system. Desktop visual effects that were introduced in the preceding edition and are covered in chapters 8 and 10 have been allied to options that make the desktop more accessible to disabled users. Improvements in the Linux kernel itself have resulted in better support for wireless networking, and proprietary drivers for many common graphics cards can bring unmatched visual sophistication to even entry-level machines. The DVD-ROM supplied with the book. The DVD-ROM attached to the book is completely new compared to that offered with previous editions. This edition offers a double-sided DVD-ROM that contains virtually every official release of Ubuntu 9.04. including not only the main Ubuntu release, but also Kubuntu, Edubuntu, and Xubuntu, and some releases for alternative hardware platforms such as older PowerPC-based Macintosh computers. By booting from the DVD-ROM, you can opt to install Ubuntu or run in live mode, which means that the entire operating system boots from the disk and doesn't touch your hard disk. This can be useful for those who wish to try out Ubuntu, but there are a handful of caveats, which we explain in Chapter 5. The contents of the DVD-ROM are explained in detail in Appendix D. Conventions used in this book. The goal when writing Beginning Ubuntu Linux was to make it as readable as possible, while providing the facility for readers to learn at their own pace. Throughout the book, you'll find various types of notes, sidebars complementing the regular text. These are designed to provide handy information to help further your knowledge. They also make reading the book a bit easier. A note is designed to provide an important piece of information that you should know and that will help your understanding of the topic being discussed. Tip. A tip is something that will keep when you need to perform the task being described. Alternatively, it might be something that can make your life easier when using Ubuntu. Caution. A caution is something you should certainly pay attention to because it warns of a hidden danger or a particular caveat that applies to the topic being discussed. In the sidebars, we take a moment to explain something that you should know, but that isn't vital to an understanding of the main topic being discussed. You don't need to read the sidebars there and then. You can return to them later if you wish. Okay, next we'll cover part 1. That's the end of this segment. Stay tuned.